Hi, Dyslexic Genius here. I'm back on the Cheney motor, and sometimes you run into like a doldrum. On these offbeat motors, like they built this Cheney, they do a few things backwards, and that is the casting doesn't come apart. So what Cheney did with this gear, and this is a spin. This gear here is for the spring barrels, and then this drives the spindle shaft. They put everything together, then they pressed in this brass bearing. Now, on the top side, you have this screw, which is a tension adjustment. And now, since this was built roughly 1914 to whenever, we're looking at over 100 years, how far do we go on a restoration? If you have it here, and I put my finger on this shaft, you go here, it spins freely, see? Because we have a little play in the bottom of this brass bearing, and we go over here, we have the same feeling. So, what do you do? Two things. You can clean everything like this because the casting doesn't come apart, and this is all tight in here, and it'll float on the gear when it's all together.
Float on the spring barrel or
It'll
what?
float on the spring barrel. It'll just float here. It'll find its spot, its soft spot to run, which I would do. Or you spend hundreds of dollars in machine time cutting this gear out, taking this gear off, building a new shaft, and putting everything back together. And now you're going to have more money in the motor than you have in the whole phonograph.
But there's nothing the matter with
There's
that.
nothing to matter with it. So I'm going to leave it in place like this. I've adjusted this top screw for backlash because the backlash screw doesn't want to come out either. And sometimes they had great ideas, and sometimes they just thought this was a good idea. And that's
But now you can't, how are you going to clean that since that's a fiber gear?
I'm not cleaning this gear. I'll clean.
Okay, so you're not going to immerse this then.
No, you take that center bearing out, which I really like. I'll show you what I've done. Take this out. I'm going to show you some things about this motor. You see the machine marks? When they are making this, they are using a dull, high-speed steel thing. And then the machinist would do this, and then he'd just roll the carriage back. Now, you see this swirl line right here? This line that goes, see my finger? I spin the shaft. So the lathe is spinning, and he just drug this back over, and they had slack in the lathe, and it left this. So I came back in and polished this out because these little lines make burrs. So this would run like that. It runs a lot smoother. And that's what I'm going to do with this motor. But you run into little problems like this on some motors, and you have to go, do I spend a lot of money in machine time fixing this, or do we just hope for the best? So we're going to hope for the best on this. Everything will be cleaned and oiled right. You put the motor together, if it fires up and runs, and we're not getting a lot of noise, you'll be good to go. But the things you have to consider sometimes in restoration. You know, this isn't an Edison or Victor, you know, the big three, or Columbia, you know, pop it in, pop it out, and you're good to go. And they were built loose too on assembly. And that's what we have to do. And that's my tip for the day.